Hi guys, welcome to the Marketing Rizz Podcast. I am your host Crispino, and today we are joined by Roxanne Pavri. Roxanne is a board member and investor at Cinedubs and helps startups and SMEs scale with clarity, discipline, and purpose. She has 23 plus years of experience across financial sectors, telecom, entertainment, design, events, and investment banking. So, with great pleasure, welcome to the podcast, Roxanne. It is great to have you here with us.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to call you Chris because that's an easy way for me to go about. And
Perfect.
I'll give you a little background about myself, So, everybody, good afternoon. I'm Roxanne Pavri. I work very closely with startups and SMEs on
Hmm.
strategy, fundraising, and of course, growth. So I've worked across different industries over 2 decades. And my role today is helping founders make better decisions to scale their business so that they don't break their business in the long run. That's the key
Hmm.
thing that I do at this given point of time.
So I've seen your LinkedIn, Roxanne, and you in your previous life, I think you were a lot involved in HR.
Yes. So I've done a lot. Actually, I've done
Uh,
almost for a very long time. I've worked for CXO's office. I was an extended E to the CXO's office. And
hmm.
you get a little, because you work for those powerhouse, you have a whole
Hmm.
view of what is happening in the organization. There's a lot of roles that you play. And of course, I have as an MBA in HR. So I wanted to do something in that field. So of course, when I moved out of the EA role, I did something in the HR. And then I realized that I don't like this too much. It's not giving me the zeal. I mean, that there is
Yeah,
you have a different zeal to do things in life. And then, of course, I
absolutely.
took a short break, and then I started working, partnered with Arthonomics.
Hmm.
Harish Patel is the CEO, and he and I go a long way. And that's when I realized that, this is very interesting. And I had investment banking and venture capital as my background for the past
Uh,
23 years. So definitely this gave me a lot more insight and a
uh,
better vision of how I can do things with startups and SMEs and stuff like that.
Love it. I think it's safe to say you're loving this new role and you're
I do.
thriving in it.
I do. I
Nice.
definitely do it. It's something new because, the startup world is very different, right? There are so many
Hmm.
things. When you're working in an organization, you really don't know. You just, you're wearing those shields. So, this is your role. This is your SOP. This is what your KPI requires you to do for the year. And that's about it.
Hmm.
But when
Got
you're
it.
in with different startups, right? When you're working with different startups for fundraising, there are so many things that I get to learn, what are the different products that are coming? What are the different
Hmm.
technology that is being used? And
Yeah.
it's all in the unlisted space, right? So, and then we, of course, help them from pre-seed to Series A, raising
Hmm.
capital. Also, sometimes you give advice to SMEs that are
Hmm.
preparing for IPO, right? So that is
Hmm.
one part of my role at Arthonomics. And of course, with Cinedubs, I have been an angel investor and a board member now,
Hmm.
and also supported them in the initial stage where sales was concerned, because sales was my strength as well, which I never realized. So I think
Wow.
that gives me an overall different flavor of doing different things. So you're not
Hmm.
stagnated and you get to do a lot more and learn a lot more in the overall run.
That's very interesting, Roxanne. So, Roxanne, I'd like to ask you, since funding is a very important part of your role, how do startup founders, how should they view valuation? And when should a startup look for funding?
So I think, valuation is something that a founder should think beyond valuation
Hmm.
sometimes, right? Because when you play the valuation game, it
Hmm.
really doesn't go a long way. For instance, it's a marriage. Like you want the right investor on board because the investor is not
Hmm.
just bringing money. They will come with
Hmm.
a lot of guidance. They will come with a lot of network. They can help you during your crisis. So it's
Hmm.
like I can give you dowry, but if the man turns out to be bad, right? You've seen,
Yeah.
because when you just play the evaluation game, your product needs to talk, your customers need to talk, what you're providing. Are you solving an environment problem, or what are you solving? That holds more value than valuation as a such, right? And
Hmm.
in the initial stages, we've seen sometimes founders get desperate and
Hmm.
they want cash flow, money, and they will reduce their valuation sometimes and get founders on board. I mean, the cap table can increase, right? So you need to make sure that whenever you're bringing in an investor, please be mindful of who you're bringing in, because it's like a marriage. Because the investor is you'll be answerable to the investor in a lot many ways, and
Yeah.
your performance is valued. your decision making is shared by the investors. I think that is a very, very long term that you need to figure out how you have to go about with your valuation process.
I love this analogy of a marriage, Roxanne. I mean, I
I'll
couldn't
give you a
agree
lot
more.
of these, I'll give you a lot of these.
Love it, love it. So, what are some of the things that a founder can keep in mind when looking out for an investor? Is there like a checklist or some guardrails that you could provide on this?
So, basic, like, for example, if you're going to a family office or you're going to a VC, are you going to, depends on I think a founder should also be able to question the investor's credibility, because sometimes when you bring in the right investor to your, product, or you have an investor attached, the name makes a lot of value. It's just not that you're going to do it one round and you're going to close, right? You have a pre-series and then series A, B, whatever, So I think the right investor initially makes a lot of difference. And of course, when the first time the investor has invested, right? Is the investor, what is your deal with the investor? Are they going to be wanting weekly reports, monthly reports? Are they going to sit on your head? Going to give you, are they going to micromanage? So I think those questions, you need to ask, and have how many companies have they invested in, unlisted companies? What do they see as a vision for this company and things like that? So two-way communication is very important, because just because you need the money, most of the people are like, okay, I'm going to bow down and do the bid. But I think you need to have that communication very, very smoothly, because you're going to be in bed with this person for a very long time. And I think if you're going to do that, then you need to know the good and the bad and the ugly of the person before you even make the first move. And don't do anything out of desperation.
Yeah.
Go slow, take your time, evaluate, because they are doing the same for you, right? So I think it's a two-way street. You have to work both ways.
Got it. Love it, Roxanne. This was solid advice. And I think because of Shark Tank, I've seen a lot in the circle, people have glorified this valuation game and funding game. And it's become like a competition, or like, they kind of uh, thrive in putting those big terms out there.
True.
So also I would like to ask you the difference between bootstrap and funding. Like, how should a founder look at it, and when should they switch from maybe bootstrap to raising funds?
So I think when you're raising funds, right, in the initial stages, we've seen mostly that founders put in their own initial money, or they've borrowed, or the family, they collect, and that's how this starts. And depends on your product, right? If it's a small product, are you able to fund it? Like there are companies which are doing AI, and that are doing AIs in very different products, and some are doing D2C, and some are. So it depends on what your service is, what your customers are. Are you, and then you start funding, asking for fund foundations, because no investor will actually step in till they don't see some valuation. For example, if I'm an investor, I would want to even see where my exit plan is, correct? How am I going to exit? And that is very important. That's the first question. Not all, but some investors will ask. If you don't, so initially, I think every founder puts in from their own pocket. Either we've seen sometimes they borrow money on high interest, or they mortgage their own property or assets, and then they reach out once they've started building a visibility. And I think more than sales, I feel that if your product is, the marketing has to be done very well in what I see, because if you're not visible, you're not going to be
Absolutely.
able to sell. And in Hindi,
Yeah.
there's the word, right? Jo dikhta hai, wahi bikta hai. And it works, because I think if I want to be out there for people to know who I am, I have to be highly visible. I think that's when the change happens. So I think first you need to build that visibility also before you even go to fundraising. And it helps
Yes.
in a long term. Because
Yeah.
there are questions that they'll ask, if I'm, because some investors will invest for 8 years and they want an exit after that. Some will be like, okay, I don't care. Money is there. I have a lot of money. I don't care. I'm investing because I like the product. And, usually most of the people, including me, when I've invested, I think I would invest on the founder first. Very important. I think my product is great, but I'm a lazy, lousy founder.
Yeah.
And I'm not able to run that. If I'm not driven, I'm not aggressive, I don't understand the need of my customer, I'm not improvising, I'm not, having an open communication with my team, you're in deep shit after that.
I
So
know.
yeah, that's
Absolutely.
the whole.
Love it, love it. Love this advice, Roxanne. And I've also seen some founders who are approaching funding or to raise rounds of funding. And their brand is almost non-relevant or non-present digitally, but they have done very good selling their product, and their product is really good. So my advice to them is also, usually if you build a digital presence, invest in about 3 to 6 months, push back the funding, you'll get a better evaluation, because then your brand is a bit more visible as well and more present.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I think initially, of course, if you expect miracles to happen overnight, that wouldn't. You got to have
Hmm.
patience and belief because, this the discipline that drives, what you may have a great vision,
Hmm.
and that's great, but are you translating that into execution? Because the
Hmm.
execution is the thing that requires a lot of discipline and consistency in the long run. So I think that makes a lot of difference.
So where strategy is concerned, Roxanne, where do you see a lot of these startups or SMEs facing common challenges?
So I think usually strategy stays on presentation,
Hmm.
you strategize something, but are you in sync while you're executing the stuff? Are you having an open communication with your team first? Are you building the right
Hmm.
team? Have you got the right SOPs in place? Have you got the right process in place? Because a founder for him, this is a baby, right? For him, right? It's a mother taking care of
Hmm.
a child, and they don't want anybody else to interfere, but they have to realize that when the company starts scaling, they
Hmm.
need to give their leadership team. They need to have the right leadership team first, and then give them the space to make the right decisions. They can have a mother
Hmm.
watching through the child through a nanny cam,
Hmm.
but you have to let your nannies, do the work. Then only can your vision be translated in the right execution on a day-to-day basis, right? It's very, very
Hmm.
essential. The control, and also uh, from wherever I've come in, from all the MNCs I've worked, I think they work phenomenal because they're process-driven. They're not
Hmm.
dependent on people. Tomorrow I quit the job. I'm in this, nobody's indispensable. So,
Yeah,
even the
absolutely.
founder leaves and goes, the
Hmm.
company should be able to be sustainable to run on its own, right? So process have to be in place. And that only
Hmm.
comes when you build the right from the day one. Otherwise,
Hmm.
you're just burning out all the way long.
So, but why do you think, Roxanne, that the strategy might be there on deck, but it has failed to be implemented on a day-to-day basis?
So one is, of course, the lack of communication. If I'm a founder and I don't let my team people know the exact vision of what I want. Like, for
Hmm.
example, if I tell you a techie,
Hmm.
all due respect to techie founders, right? They want to code, they want to text, do the testing, they want to do the sales hat, they want to wear the CFO's hat, they want to wear all the hats in one go. It's not
Hmm.
possible, right? And that is why the strategy fails because you have a good product, but you implemented the right people. Like you need to have a right salesperson, you need to have a right operations person because you
Hmm.
can't do all. You focus on what
Hmm.
you're good at and let the other person focus on what they're hired for because you've hired them for a specific reason. And that
Hmm.
is, it will move out from the deck to
Hmm.
reality. There's a lot of discipline. People know what they're doing, and you've had some good quality people, right? So let them do what they're best hired for. That's when the strategy becomes very, very
Yeah.
material into the day-to-day space.
So for this next question, I don't think there could be anybody better than you, Roxanne. So you worked as HR head in many organizations, and you now worked with startups. So what qualities should a entrepreneur see besides the technical knowledge? That's a given. But besides the technical knowledge, what innate qualities should a leader have when they're trying to recruit a marketing head or operations head or a CTO?
So even a CFO for that matter, because I
Yeah.
think finance and your capital has to be,
Yeah. All the heads. Yeah.
all of that, right? So I think from where I've seen and from what I think you pick up the best from the industry. And when you want to pick up the best
Hmm.
from the industry, you have to pay them the best, right? So I think
Hmm.
somewhere you have to figure out where you want to spend and where you should cut costs, right? If you want, somebody very driven. And I think it's a frequency of two people working together, right? I may
Hmm.
want growth at a certain level, but my team members higher, right? It doesn't see that growth. How do I
Hmm.
elevate the person into that? I need to be open. I need to share my numbers. I need to be transparent. I mean, I need to spend time. And the most important thing we all forget in our day to day is we stop asking people how they're actually doing.
Hmm.
And that makes a lot of difference. I mean, we're so focused on performance and sales and output and
Hmm.
numbers. We just, we don't realize the war that the person is going within, whether am I good
Hmm.
enough for this role. So I think when a founder just sits down once in a while and just talks, opens up informally, I think that also gives Because then you let the person, you're listening to ideas which may be surprisingly very good, and you may not be able to
mm,
do that in a very formal setup at times. So from that
mm,
angle, and just, you can take them for offsites, quarterly, just one day off,
mm,
picnic. I think that
mm,
bonding can also bring a lot of work, change in work culture, the way you see things, the way you want to
mm,
do things. Because, you can hire, and there's always a thing in the hire and fire, right? I may not have the skill, but I have the
mm,
will to learn, and I will
mm,
learn. But I have
mm,
the skill, but I don't have the will to do. You can't train that person. That's a
mm.
complete loss. Complete loss.
Absolutely. So, Roxanne, you've now seen different generations. You must have worked with boomers, millennials, and now Gen Zs are coming into the already come into the workforce, and Gen
Yes.
Alpha will be coming in very
Yeah,
soon.
my God.
Yeah. So, how and culture is very important. And I've seen startups usually focus a lot on the grind and just hustling and firefighting, where culture often takes the back seat. So, what's your view on that, and how and what is the importance of culture in today's world?
I think it's very important because I think if you look at Gen Zs, right, they come with a very
Hmm,
clear mindset that, I need work life balance. I didn't come from
absolutely.
a space where work life balance was anywhere measured. I worked for 18 hours at times, and I've burned out. And then I realized that after 23 years, I could take a break to reset, because we
Hmm,
were taught, we were not, when our generation was growing, my generation, and I'm not that old, but that's the phenomenal of it, right? We were taught to do, like we've been told what to do, we will do it. But today, the Gen
yeah.
Zs are very smart. They
Hmm,
are asking the right questions. They want to know,
hmm,
why am I doing something, and we never did that. So I think that culture shift a founder has to realize. And if the founder is a Gen Z,
hmm,
phenomenal. But the founder
hmm,
is somebody who's a Gen Y, or somebody older, a first generation.
hmm,
Then for them to adapt,
hmm,
to the new things. Like, even if, when you look at some first generation when you're looking at an SME and
hmm,
their first generation, they do not want to adapt, and they do not want to use technology unless it's a word of mouth. Somebody has done
hmm,
it. Cheque, now we will do it. They find it
hmm,
very difficult to look at technology space, while a new second generation, third generation youth person will want to adapt to this new
hmm,
technology, the AI systems that are in place. And I think the difference is in the mindset, the fear that is technology going to replace, is an AI going to replace me? But I think one should understand, very, very
hmm,
important understanding is, AI is only going to make your work efficient and help you move faster. You
hmm,
cannot, it will help you, it will support your thinking. It will not replace your judgment. Very, very
hmm,
important, which is something that, and it's a mindset, right? Like in 2000, when internet came in, right? We didn't know how to use the internet, right? We were like, what is this? So it's the same
yeah.
thing with AI, right? And I think the
Absolutely.
moment you shift mindset of accepting and
Hmm,
adapting to the new stuff that we're doing, I think that being a little open and not rigid, and
hmm,
both, right? I mean, if somebody comes up with an idea and don't shut them down, you're opening your doors to a little more, like a Pandora box, because they know what they're
yeah.
doing with their enthusiasm and with your experience. When you combine the two,
Yeah. I love working with Gen Zs. Like half of my team is Gen Zs. And I think the ideas that they bring in, I feel I'm little Gen Z as
yeah.
well. Although I'm a millennial,
When
but
I worked initially, I had a little
yeah,
shock of my life, but it took me a while to adjust. But I think
yeah.
they're very smart. They're very, very smart.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think I heard this on Joe Rogan's podcast. I can't remember where, or Gary Vee said this, that uh, our parents during the industrial age, their problem was food, clothing, and shelter,
True.
which was provided to them, and they were kind of fighting for those needs. Then came the millennials, who we had the food, clothing, and shelter, but we needed a better standard of living. And now the Gen Zs have the better standard of living, and now they're looking out for just the next thing, that is work-life balance or something spiritual that will give them
Right.
a feeling of achieving something
Absolutely.
more than just work.
Absolutely. Which is so true. Which
And
is true.
yeah, also I think Nikhil Kamath or someone said that they just randomly during work, if there is a Saturday and they're working, at the end, if there's a concert going on, he'll just take them to a concert. Or like they'll just go to bars and they'll do bar hopping. So I think that is what Gen Zs are looking out for right now,
True, true.
somewhere where they can feel belonging, a sense
Yeah.
of belonging. And it's more than just work and grind, but you're building relationships and something
Very
much
true.
more.
I think what you just said right now, building relationships. I think the one thing I learned in so many years, I think the two things rather, I think you should always have a network which is above and below you, because I think that network takes you everywhere. So that relationship building is superb. And you should always have somebody on the table in a boardroom that will speak for yourself, for you on your behalf, and you're not in there. And that takes you a long way. And that only happens when you've had a phenomenal relationship with the person or the mentor or whoever, right? It makes a lot of difference.
It's lovely. So, Roxanne, you spoke about AI earlier. I'd like to ask you, how has your experience been with AI and the startups and SMEs that you see? How are they receiving AI, and yeah, how are they receiving AI basically?
So, like I mentioned, right, it's not replacing you. So, the moment you understand that this is for your support and for your benefit and for you to work, like if a startup wants to use and wants to be efficient and cost effective, they can use AI for several things like customer data analysis, marketing related stuff, and a lot more. I use AI sometimes for things that I need quick assistance with. I need some data analysis. The thought process is mine, but of course, the analysis comes out and I understand. And like I said, it's like, even the government of India now is highly promoting AI. We had the AI summit coming from the governments. If I think when our prime minister is promoting it to such level, right? That means there is something really good. It's will happen. The next, it's evolving. AI is also evolving the way we are. It is just going to enhance. So I think when we start accepting that this is a tool, because if you look at certain SMEs, the Baba Lala companies and stuff, they don't want to shift from the way they do work, right? And when it's a herd mentality, right? You've done it, they have done it. Okay, now I can do because it's safe to do. But I think if you start pioneering and taking the risk and doing it, you're going to make a lot of life easy for your employees also when when you're doing certain number crunching or analyzing certain data, because then they are utilized their time for something else more valuable that can add more value to your organization. So I think the usage of AI, it'll happen. I mean, we have 3 companies in pipeline, companies, and of course, they've done some phenomenal work in genome mapping. Doctors are also going to be using AI. Government is using AI. So it's across the globe, right? And the sooner we accept that this is a tool to support us and not replace us, a lot will change.
Amazing. So, what about governance, Roxanne? Have you read the article about Deloitte, what happened in Australia?
No, unfortunately, no, I
Okay.
haven't.
So they charged, I can't remember the name, don't quote me on that, but I think 6 million for one of their clients to present a report. And at the end of the report, the chat GPT's footer message, like,
Yeah, yeah,
would you like me to do
yeah,
something
yeah,
else? And
yeah.
this became a big issue. So I would like to ask you, like, how do we govern it? And how do you know now what's real and what's worth $3 million and what's just an AI scratch from the internet?
So I'll give you a very simple example, right? For example, I want to write something. I want to write a book and I'll give instructions. Like I said, right? You have to use your judgment. You have to use your common sense, which sometimes most people
It's
don't
not very
have.
common.
Not very common. And I think you can ask ChatGPT to write down the whole stuff, but I think you need to review it. You need to see whether this is matching your expectations and or the thought process. Because I'm sure you're in that position, you've been there, you've done the job before, right? So now you need to see whether this is in, and you can write a lot of stuff back to ChatGPT saying, I don't agree to this. This is not.
Yeah.
But when you go back and forth, right? I mean, just don't blindly copy paste things and say, okay, yeah, it's done it, so perfect yoga. No, you got to give right instructions, right? And then it'll give you the right outcome. So I think you need to be cautious. That's where the
Yeah.
judgment comes in place, where your intelligence comes in place, where your knowledge and experience comes in place, which an AI cannot replace. That is
Absolutely.
unfortunate truth, but the very important truth.
Roxanne, this was amazing. I had a great time on this podcast with you, and I've got to learn a lot for my own business as well. Like, I can apply a lot of what you said, a lot of your mindset suggestions will really help me out, and I'm sure to help out the audience as well. So, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. This was a pleasure. It was nice because, I mean, when you do it, you don't realize how much you've learned and how much you've experienced and how much that is going to come out, And I think it's nice if somebody, this is useful for anybody who listens to it and can see how they can frame, because I think at the end of the day, it's your mindset and behavior that runs the organization. I think you can do everything well, but if I am not in the right frame of mind, I don't think I can run anything at that given point of time, right? So I think that tuning, it's all human behavior at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your product can be good, excellent, or moderate. But if you're
Yeah.
driven and you know how to sell that product, I think you will go a long way. That's about
Absolutely. And yeah, I like your view on funding, on valuation, those points. As I mentor a lot of startups in that space who are looking to raise funds. So I think that part of the episode will definitely help them a lot. And then finally, before I let you go, Roxanne, I'd like to ask you one last uncomfortable truth about scaling that most entrepreneurs learn very late.
Yeah, very important. So, when they scale, right, they don't realize simple, the growth factor, right? When you want to grow, growth should not be at any cost. You need to grow, which is valuable. But when you're scaling, or when you're acquiring, market share for the customer, customer acquisition. For example, like I'm spending 100 rupees for a customer acquisition, but I am only earning 60 rupees from the customer. Am I scaling in the right direction? Is it increasing my losses, or am I just the growth? I'm scaling, but where am I making the revenue? So when you scale, you should have to scale in parts, and you need to have that vision that, from the first year to third year, this is going to be my vision to grow. I need to have the right team. I need to have the right system in place. I need to have the right metrics in place while I'm growing. When I'm growing, my valuation should not be the baseline when I'm asking for, and I have to have the right investors, because when I bring in the right investors who are not interfering into my day to day, right, then my scaling can happen. I have a breather. I am the decision maker and not dependent on my investors to give me a yes or a no, or can I do this? You don't have to run back to, like teacher, can I do this? Right.
Yeah.
So and I think we realize this very late, but be mindful of all of that. And then most important thing, very, very important, what founders, I think, know about it, but don't realize this. I think while they're scaling, they put in so much of your time and energy, and they burn out so much that they forget that while you have to scale in your business, you also need time to breathe. Time is the only thing that can't come back, and you need to spend time with your family, your friends. Otherwise, you're burning out. And because you're burning out, you're not having the capacity to think. And that is something that most founders really don't do. It's a very personal space, but I think they know about it, because when they get into building a startup from scratch, right, you have sleepless nights. But the point is, how do you draw that line and say that, no, this is it, and I will deal with this tomorrow. I need to have a good night's sleep, or I need to spend time with my family, and this is my time with my children or my wife or my spouse or parents or whatever, right? I think that if they realize when they wake up, next day, and a good night's sleep does a lot of miracles. At least for me, it does.
Yeah.
It changes the way you want. If you're not able to get a solution to a problem, leave it. Don't fixate on it. Leave it. You wake up fresh, you will have an answer or a solution to it, and that works.
Awesome, awesome. Lovely advice, Roxanne. Thank you so much. You've truly spoken like a veteran with 20 plus years of experience. That was lovely. That was amazing. And I hope you had a good time as well. And yeah, thank you so much once again.
Thanks for inviting me, Chris. Thank you so much.